My name is Claire Hendricks, and the worst night of my life didn't happen in a hospital ward or on a flooded highway in Fort McMurray. It happened on my sister's front porch in Barrie, Ontario, 11 days after I buried my father. I had been working up north for 4 years. Not glamorous work. Shift nursing at a remote care facility outside of Timmins. The kind of place where the nearest Tim Hortons is a 40-minute drive and winter arrives in October and doesn't apologize until May. I had chosen it deliberately. The pay was better. The need was real. And honestly, after my father's first stroke, throwing myself into other people's pain felt easier than sitting with my own. I missed a lot while I was up there. Birthday dinners, Christmas mornings, the slow daily erosion of my father's health that my sister had apparently been managing entirely on her own. She made sure I knew that. Every phone call. Every holiday text. "You're not here, Claire. You don't understand what this is like." She wasn't wrong that I wasn't there. She was wrong about everything else. When Dad passed in late February, I drove 14 hours straight from Timmins to Barrie in a truck that smelled like road salt and old coffee. I sat in the third row at his funeral because my sister had arranged the seating and somehow there wasn't space for me in the family section. I told myself it was grief talking. People fall apart in strange ways. I took my bereavement leave, emptied my bank account into a motel on Dunlop Street, and waited for the estate to be sorted. The will reading happened on a Thursday morning in a lawyer's office downtown. My sister arrived with her husband. He wore a blazer. She wore the kind of composed expression that takes years to perfect. I wore the same dark jeans I'd been rotating for a week. The lawyer, a quiet man named Gerald who kept his glasses on a cord around his neck, read the document methodically. Our family home on Codrington Street, 3 bedrooms, established neighborhood, assessed at just over $800,000 to my sister. The savings bonds, the RRSP, the bank accounts, the car, split, with the majority to my sister given her role as primary caregiver, and to me, the property on Elgin Street. A decommissioned bookshop my father had bought at auction 12 years ago. He'd always said he had plans for it. He never said what they were. Nobody had been inside it in at least 3 years. My sister smiled at me across the table. It was brief, just long enough. I called her that evening. I was calm. I said I wasn't contesting anything. I just wanted to understand the reasoning, maybe talk through it together. She listened for about 90 seconds before she interrupted. "You weren't here, Claire. You made your choice." Dad made his. I said that wasn't fair. That I'd been working. That I'd been sending money home every month, money she'd never acknowledged or accounted for. That's not the same as being present. Her voice dropped. "You want to know what Dad said about you the last year? He said he didn't know who you were anymore. He said you'd become a stranger." I didn't respond. I heard her husband's voice in the background, low and encouraging, like a coach. "You got the bookshop," she said. "Maybe you can do something useful with it for once." And then she said it, quietly, almost gently, the way you say something you've been rehearsing. "You've always been the one who disappears, Claire. That's just who you are." I sat in my motel room for a long time after that. The heating unit rattled against the wall. Outside, a plow scraped slush off Dunlop Street with a sound like something tearing. I didn't cry. I'd been in rooms with people dying. I knew what loss actually sounded like, and this wasn't the same. This was something smaller and colder, the specific quiet of being written off by someone who shares your blood. I drove to Elgin Street at 11 o'clock at night. The building was narrower than I remembered. A double storefront, brick face, painted sign above the door so faded the original name was completely illegible. The city had done some street work nearby and the curb was freshly poured, looking absurd against the neglect of the building itself. One of the front windows had been covered from the inside with brown paper that had since gone brittle and peeled at the corners. I had the key Gerald had handed me in an envelope. It stuck twice before the lock gave. Inside smelled like old paper, cedar, and something mineral I couldn't place. My phone flashlight swept over shelving units still in place, empty except for a few boxes, a broken dehumidifier in the corner, a work table pushed against the back wall. Dust so thick it moved when I breathed. There was no romance to it, It was just a dead room full of someone else's abandoned intentions. I was looking for a place to sit down when I noticed the back wall. There was a door, not unusual, but beyond the door was a second room I hadn't expected. Deeper than the storefront, lower ceiling, cooler air. A workroom maybe, or storage. The shelving in here was different. Metal, institutional, the kind hospitals use for supply closets, and the shelves weren't empty. Binders, dozens of them, labeled in my father's handwriting. Neat, slightly left-leaning, the same script he used to write grocery lists and birthday cards. I pulled one down. Architectural drawings, property assessments, permit applications, some approved, some pending. I pulled another. Correspondence with the city. Heritage designation inquiries, rezoning requests, contractor estimates. A third, financial statements for something called Hendricks Cultural Properties, Inc., a numbered company I had never heard of. I sat down on the concrete floor. My father had been quietly developing this property for over a decade, not building it out, navigating it. Heritage designation fights, zoning changes, the kind of slow, unglamorous bureaucratic work that takes years and leaves almost no visible trace. And in a fireproof lockbox at the base of the center shelf, tucked beneath a folder of contractor warranties, was an envelope with my name on it. Not Claire. Not the Timmons one. Just Claire. His handwriting. I opened it. You'll find this because you're the one who looks at things properly, not from a distance, up close, even when it costs you. I stopped reading. Started again. The bookshop was never about books. I want you to understand that before you read anything else. I had plans for Elgin Street for a long time, but plans take patience, and I wasn't sure which of my daughters have learned that. I know now. I should have told you this in person. I ran out of time being someone who didn't say things out loud. Don't do what I did. The letter continued for 2 more pages. He described the numbered company, its assets, the heritage application that had been conditionally approved 18 months earlier, what that meant for the property's value and its development potential. He described a trust he had established through a separate instrument, not the will, separate, legally independent, with me named as sole beneficiary and trustee. He described what he hoped I would do with it. He also described my sister, not cruelly. That wasn't his way. But precisely. Dates. Incidents. A pattern of behavior during his illness that he had noticed and written down because he was, above everything, a methodical man. Requests made to redirect his accounts. Pressure applied around medical decisions. Conversations steered away from me. He had not confronted her because he was dying and confrontation felt like a waste of the time he had left. Instead, he left a record. I read everything twice. Then I sat in the dark of that back room for a long time, listening to February do what February does in Ontario. My father hadn't given me less. He had given me the part that required more. I didn't call my sister the next morning. I called a lawyer, not Gerald, a different one. A woman named Susan Auerbach, who specialized in estate disputes and had a reputation in Barrie for being thorough in a way that made opposing counsel nervous. I brought everything I'd found. She read for 45 minutes without speaking. When she looked up, she said, "Where did you find the lockbox?" I told her. "Did your sister have access to the building?" "Not since Dad stopped going," I said. "Maybe longer." She set her pen down. "You understand this changes the estate picture significantly." I said I was beginning to understand that, yes. 2 weeks later, Susan had connected me with a forensic accountant, a methodical man from Aurelia named David Park, who communicated primarily through annotated spreadsheets and whose voice, when he did speak, was the flattest I had ever heard. He requested full financial disclosure on the family home and my sister's personal accounts as part of the estate review process. What came back was not what any of us expected, including, I think, my sister. The house on Codrington Street was mortgaged to within about $40,000 of its assessed value. There were 2 refinancings in the last 3 years. A line of credit extended to its limit, business revenues. My sister ran what she described online as a lifestyle consultancy. Inconsistent, heavily seasonal, dependent on brand partnerships that had become increasingly difficult to renew. Her household expenses, David noted in his flat voice, significantly exceeded her documented income. She was performing stability. The performance was expensive. I drove past Codrington Street once that month. Fresh planters on the porch, a new outdoor furniture set, a sign on the lawn advertising a community fundraiser she was apparently organizing. Nothing about the exterior suggested that anything was wrong. That was exactly the problem. I went back to Elgin Street and started working. I am not someone who waits well. Nursing had taught me that useful action and productive waiting are different things, and there is almost always useful action available if you look for it. I hired an electrician, a retired guy named Barrie who had done work for my father years ago and quoted me fairly because he remembered him. I called the Heritage office and reintroduced myself as the new trustee. I had the front window uncovered and cleaned. Small things, visible things. Because in a mid-sized Ontario city, visible things travel. Word got around the neighborhood. The Hendricks girl was back, the nurse from up north, fixing up the old bookshop on Elgin. My sister showed up on a Tuesday afternoon in March. She parked her SUV half a block away, which I noticed because I noticed things. She walked toward the building in the particular way she has of moving through spaces she considers beneath her, chin slightly elevated, pace slightly deliberate, as if making an entrance even when no one is watching. She stopped at the doorway. I was on a stepladder cleaning a light fixture. "You're actually staying," she said. "I came down off the ladder." "Yes." She looked around slowly. Dad really thought this was equivalent. I didn't answer. "I'm just saying, Claire, you could sell it. You could take whatever you get for it and move on. There's nothing keeping you here. There might be more here than you think." She laughed a little. "It's a derelict building in a transitional neighborhood. I've seen the assessments." "Which assessments?" A small pause. "Dad showed me things. When he was sick, he wanted me to be informed." I looked at her steadily. "Which assessments did he show you?" Her jaw shifted. Then she shifted strategies the way she always has. "Look, I know you think this is unfair, but I was the one who was here. I was the one who took him to his appointments, managed his medications, handled everything while you were—" "I know," I said, "while you were up in Timmins doing whatever it was that mattered more to you." "He needed nurses up there too," I said. "Real ones. Don't make it noble. You left." I looked at her for a moment. "I came back every time I could. I sent money every month. I called 3 times a week until you started answering less." I paused. "I have the records." Something moved across her face. Not guilt, not yet. Something more like calculation. She left without saying goodbye, which is how our conversations had been ending for years. The legal process is not dramatic. That is a thing films get wrong consistently. There are no shouting matches in hallways, no tearful confessions over courtroom furniture. There are filings and response windows and procedural notices and the slow, grinding forward motion of institutional consequence. Susan submitted the estate dispute application in March. The trust documentation was separately registered. A request went in for full financial disclosure of all accounts connected to the estate. Through a trust-approved mechanism, we acquired a small but legally significant interest in an outstanding lien connected to the Codrington Street property. Not enough to foreclose, enough to create pressure, and enough to restrict certain financial maneuvers my sister had apparently been counting on. She began calling Susan's office within a month. Then she called me. The first call I let go to voicemail. The message was controlled, formal, almost professional. She had questions about the filing. She wanted to discuss. She hoped we could handle this like adults. The second call came 2 weeks later. I answered. "What is this, Claire?" Not a question, a statement with a frayed edge. "It's a review of the estate records," I said. "You know what it is. You're trying to take the house." "I'm asking for an accurate accounting of the estate," I said. "That's a legal right. You don't need a lawyer for that." Susan seems to think differently. Silence. Then, "You never cared about any of this when he was alive." "That's not true," I said quietly. "I cared. I just wasn't here. Those are different things. Don't make that distinction with me." I let that sit for a moment. Then I said, "Did he ever tell you why he kept the bookshop?" She didn't answer. "He told me," I said. "In writing. He left me a letter." The quality of her silence changed. I think you should talk to your own lawyer, I said. I think you should do that this week. I hung up. Spring arrived the way it does in central Ontario. Reluctantly, then all at once, mud and snowmelt and one warm afternoon that makes you forget every bad thing you said to anyone in February. I was at the building 6 days a week by then. The electrical was done. Barrie had also helped me find a plumber. The heritage designation had been formally confirmed, which changed the property's status and opened grant funding streams my father had apparently known were coming for years. The Barrie arts community found out about the space. A collective of local artists reached out about using the front room for a rotating exhibition. A community literacy organization asked about programming space. I said yes to both, conditionally, while the renovation continued. Elgin Street, it turned out, sat at the center of a neighborhood the city had been quietly designating for cultural corridor development for the better part of a decade. My father had bought his way into that corridor when the property was cheap and the plan was not yet public. He had waited. He had maintained the designation paperwork. He had done nothing flashy. And he had put my name on the trust. He was not a sentimental man, but he was a precise one. My sister's reckoning came in the first week of June, at a fundraising gala she was hosting at the Barrie Country Club for a local children's hospital foundation. She had been organizing it for months. Her name on the program as lead coordinator, sponsors from the local business community. Local media invited. I received an invitation through the foundation board, which had recently added me as a donor given the community programming we were establishing at Elgin Street. I wore a simple navy dress. I arrived on time. The room smelled like spring flowers and catered salmon, round tables with white linens, a small stage, a slide presentation thanking sponsors in a loop on a screen near the entrance. My name appeared on it. I saw my sister notice that before she noticed me. She crossed the room toward me. Her smile was the practiced one, the networking smile, just short of warmth. Claire. She extended a hand, as though we had met at a conference. You look well, I said, and I meant it neutrally. She scanned my dress, my posture, my complete absence of visible distress. That, I think, is what unsettled her most. She had been bracing for anger. Why are you here? I was invited. By whom? The foundation, I said. I've been working with their community programming team. The smile held, but the architecture behind it shifted. That's? She searched for a word. Unexpected. I've been busy. She leaned slightly closer, voice dropping. This isn't the place, Claire. For what? For whatever you're planning. I'm here for the gala, I said simply. She held my gaze for another moment, then excused herself and returned to her table near the front. I could see her husband lean in when she sat down, his hand on her arm, her response clipped and short. The program began at 7:30. The foundation president spoke. Sponsors were thanked. Then the introduction of my sister as lead organizer, architect of the evening. Applause. She ascended to the microphone gracefully, gathered herself, and began speaking about community and care and the importance of showing up. Susan's process server walked in at 7:42. He was unremarkable, mid-40s, navy jacket, the professional quietness of someone accustomed to entering rooms at the exact wrong moment. He approached the event coordinator near the door. There was a brief exchange. The coordinator walked to the front of the room. She leaned toward the foundation president at the head table and spoke quietly. The president stood. Apologized for the interruption. Asked that the program pause briefly for an administrative matter. My sister stopped mid-sentence. The documents were related to the estate dispute, the lien enforcement notice, and a separately filed complaint regarding material misrepresentation in estate disclosures. The process server did not raise his voice. He did not need to. In a room of 200 people, paper moves loudly. My sister's composure held for almost a full minute. She was, in that way, genuinely impressive. She stepped down from the stage. She spoke quietly to the president. She turned to address the room with a smile that cost her something visible. There's been an administrative confusion, she said. I apologize for the interruption. We'll have this sorted momentarily. But people were already leaning toward one another. Phones appearing above napkins. The particular energy of a room that is scented something wrong does not dissipate with a smile and an apology. It intensifies. Her husband stood. They spoke in low voices near the stage. She turned and found me across the room. The distance between us was maybe 30 feet, and it felt like standing on opposite sides of a river neither of us had wanted to cross. She walked toward me. Her face, up close, was the face I remembered from childhood, before all the performance, before she learned that appearance was currency. It was the face of someone who had run out of resources. "You did this on purpose," she said. "I didn't arrange the timing," I said. "That was Susan's office." "Don't." Her voice cracked at the edge. "Don't tell me it was procedural." I said nothing. "You humiliated me." Her eyes filled. "Not theatrical. Just tired, in front of everyone." I held her gaze. "You told me I always disappear." She swallowed. "You told me that in front of your husband, in a phone call. 11 days after we buried our father." I kept my voice level. "You said I was the one who leaves." I was... She stopped. "You isolated him," I said quietly, "toward the end. I have his records. He knew what was happening. He wrote it down." Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. "He didn't leave you the house because you deserved it more," I said. "He left it to you because he thought it would hold you. He left me Elgin Street because he thought it would hold me. He wasn't choosing between us. He was trying to give each of us what we needed." She looked at me for a long moment. Her husband was approaching behind her. "The difference," I said, "is that I didn't know what I had. And it sounds like you didn't know what you were risking." She didn't answer. She let her husband lead her toward the exit. The gala continued slightly less festively. I stayed for another 45 minutes, spoke to 3 foundation board members, and left when the salmon was cleared. The thing about consequence is it doesn't arrive all at once. It accrues, like interest. The legal process moved forward over the summer. The estate dispute resulted in a court-supervised review. A portion of the estate assets were redistributed. The Codrington Street property was not immediately seized, but its sale was mandated within 18 months to resolve outstanding liens and estate obligations. My sister was given time and structure and the kind of dignity that a well-written settlement allows for even when the underlying circumstances are not dignified at all. I kept Elgin Street. By August, the front room had been transformed into a rotating exhibition space. Warm wood floors that Barrie had helped me refinish, good northern light from the cleaned windows, local art on the walls. The literacy program ran Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. We had applied for a federal community spaces grant, citing the heritage designation, and the application looked strong. A veterans transition program reached out in September, a provincial initiative matching former military and first responders with community-based employment and mental health supports. They needed a physical location in Barrie. We had a back room that could be converted. I said yes, and we started drafting the agreement. My sister came to Elgin Street for the first time in early October. She didn't call ahead. I heard the bell above the door while I was in the back reviewing contractor quotes. I came out and she was standing just inside the entrance, looking at the exhibition, her hands in her coat pockets. She looked like someone who had driven a long way and wasn't sure the destination had been worth it. She looked smaller than I'd been carrying her in my memory. "It's nice," she said, without looking at me. "It's actually really nice." I said thank you. She moved slowly along the wall, looking at the work. A landscape series by a Métis artist from the Georgian Bay area. Strong pieces. She stopped in front of one. Winter birch, pale and precise. "I didn't know he had plans," she said, "for this building. He never told me." "I know," I said. "He never told me a lot of things." She paused. "I thought I was doing everything right. I thought being there, every day, managing everything. I thought that was what he needed. That's what he said he needed." I let her talk. And I thought, I think I started to believe that what I was doing was worth more than what you were doing. Because I could see mine, and yours was invisible. She turned. "I know that's not an excuse." "It isn't," I said. "I know." She looked at the floor. "I'm not here to ask you to forgive me. I know that takes longer than this." She paused. I needed to see it. What he left you. What you made of it." We stood there for a while. The afternoon light was doing something good with the birch painting. Through the window, Elgin Street went about its business, unhurried. The settlement, she said finally. The Codrington Street sale. I have a place to go. Smaller. It's fine. It's actually, she stopped. It's probably what I should have been living in for years. She almost smiled at that, not the practiced one, something more honest. I said, if she ever wanted to come to one of the programming evenings, she was welcome. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. She left and I went back to my contractor quotes. Outside, a city bus hissed to a stop on Elgin. A woman got off, looked up at the building, and kept walking. Ordinary, unremarkable. The kind of afternoon that doesn't ask anything of you. My father never told me he loved me in those exact words. He was a man who expressed things structurally, the way a building is sound, not because you can see what's holding it up, but because it stands. He left me a derelict property in a heritage corridor and a letter that said, "You're the one who looks at things properly." I had to decide if that was enough. Standing in that building in October, with birch trees on the walls and a veterans program in the back and the sound of a Tuesday literacy class filtering through the door, I thought it might be more than enough. I thought it might be exactly what he meant. People ask me sometimes what I took away from all of it. I never know where to start, because the honest answer isn't clean or quotable. It doesn't fit on a card. What I know is this. My sister wasn't wrong that I was absent. She was wrong about what that absence meant. Those are two different things, and for a long time I let her collapse them together because I felt guilty enough that it seemed fair. Guilt has a way of making other people's narratives feel more accurate than your own lived experience. I gave her that power without realizing I was doing it, and it cost me years of believing I had already forfeited my right to belong. My father understood something I didn't. That the choices we make when no one is watching, when there's no audience to validate us, when the work is unglamorous and the location is remote and the recognition is essentially zero, those choices are the ones that reveal actual character, not the ones we make when people are looking. I spent 4 years in Timmins doing necessary work in difficult conditions, and I did it because it needed doing, not because anyone was going to thank me for it. My father saw that. He filed it away in his precise, methodical way, and he built something around it. My sister built something too, but she built it facing outward. Every decision calibrated to how it would appear. The house on Codrington, the SUV, the fundraising events, the online presence. None of it was fraudulent exactly. She believed in it, I think. But it had no foundation underneath that wasn't borrowed. When the pressure came, there was nothing structural holding it up. That's not a moral failure so much as a practical one. But the two tend to arrive together eventually. I think about Claire a lot. The version of me standing in that motel room on Dunlop Street after she called me the one who disappears. I was so close to accepting it. To driving back to Timmins and letting that story be the final word. What stopped me wasn't anger. It was something quieter. A small, stubborn refusal to let someone else's account of my life replace the one I actually lived. That refusal is hard to name, but I think it matters more than almost anything else I can think of. Knowing what you've done, even when no one is acknowledging it. Holding that steady when the pressure is to let it go. The bookshop on Elgin Street is not what I imagined my life would look like at this point. I imagined something more straightforward, honestly. I imagined my father alive longer. I imagined my sister and I being closer than we are. I imagined a lot of things that didn't happen. But what I have is real in a way that I am still learning to trust. The literacy program on Tuesday afternoons, the art on the walls, the veterans coming through the back door for the transition program, Barrie the electrician who still quotes me fairly because he remembers my dad. My father left me a derelict building and a letter that said I was the one who looks at things properly. I am trying, every day, to be worth that sentence.